Jordan who? Jordan. Oh, okay. Cool. I only know one person named Jordan, and that's a story. That's the first girl I ever dated. Her name was Jordan. First girl I ever dated. It was junior year of high school. How hot? Okay. Well, here was the thing. This is the big story about it. I don't know. I thought she was pretty attractive. She was like a 6 or 7, which for me, as never like had a girlfriend at all, or like never been on a date at all, that was like, yo, kind of, beggars can't be choosers. Oh wow, 10 viewers. Okay, so here's the big story. Okay, so it all started at church camp. Cool, man. Get all those views. Yo, actually, hold up. Let me go grab my corn dogs. I gotta. This is a big story. This is one of my biggest stories. Like genuinely, it's funny. I don't know. She wasn't like the hottest. I don't know. Okay, this is the thing. So there was 2 girls at this camp. One named Ashley and one named Jordan. Ashley was definitely the like cuter one. She was a lot funnier and outgoing, but Ashley had a boyfriend at the time. So Jordan was kind of like, oh, the number 2, and I was like, sure, I'll go for Jordan. And oh man, fucking this story. Hold up, be right back. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna turn down the music a bit. Oops. I'm gonna turn down the music so I can tell this story. God damn. Okay. So, this was church camp. Now, this story with Jordan. This happened. It was the summer before my junior year of high school. I was 16. And I remember for her date, or when cause like I had asked her like, hey, do you want to go to a movie? She was like, yeah, okay. And I didn't have my license yet, so she had to drive, cause she was a year older than me. She was going into senior year, I was going in my junior year, so she was a year older than me, and so she had to drive. And I still remember when she pulled up. In the drive, when she pulled up to the house in the driveway, her little brother was in the back seat, and I'm like, oh fuck. But we had talked about going, and we were going a thing because we were like kind of church friends, or that's how we were related. We were going first to like this thing with her, like church youth group was doing an event at like a senior center. We were playing like board games with like old people. Like we'd play like I remember playing Chutes and Ladders with like old Janice, who's probably like 85, and but so we did that, and then we went and we saw a movie, and luckily for that, at least we dropped her brother off, so it was just me and her for the movie. And I remember we went and saw Year One with Jack Black. I think Jack Black and was it Michael Cera? I don't know, but Year One with Jack Black for sure. And I don't know, that was just, I definitely remember that standing out. And I remember cause she lived in like the town, I don't know, she was maybe like a 20-25 minute drive like between our houses. And I remember when she picked me up, she had made a little joke like, wow, like I didn't know I have to drive this far, like you better give me gas money. And I had no idea if she was joking or not, and I was like, yo, I can't fuck up this date. So I like at the end of the night, as she was like driving me home, I put like $7 in the cup holder of her car. I'm like, yo, don't worry, this will make sure like I'm in good standing, like, oh hey, don't worry, you had a bad time. And I don't know, I mean, it was sort of awkward, like I don't know, it was like my first date, and it was with an older woman. But I mean, 1 year older, and still she was 17 and I was 16. But that was still crazy. And so I mean, that was our first date, and then I was like, oh hey, like the next week we were texting and stuff. And this was right before summer, because we had our church camp during the summer, and so this is maybe like July. And we go, and then so like the next few weeks, like I mean, we'd be texting and stuff, and we would like every Friday night we'd go out to a movie, and it would be like, I remember once I got my license, my parents were like, okay, you have your license now, but you can't drive with like anybody else in the car. So I would have, my parents told me I had to drive to her house and then get out and get into her car, and she drives to the movies. And so, we'd like go to the movies, and then afterwards we'd come out, and usually I would buy ice cream, and then we'd like drive back to her house or something, maybe sit and chat, and then I'd go home. Never gave her a kiss. And I remember after like the third date, that was like Saturday night, and then I went to church the next morning because I met her through church, and like she went to a different church than mine, but like my other friends from church were like asking me about it, like, hey, like what's going on with Jordan? And I'm like, like we had some good times and stuff, and everybody's like, well, are you guys boyfriend girlfriend? Like, is it official yet? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, how do you know when it's officially like boyfriend girlfriend? I had never done this before, so I was like, I'm not quite sure of the terminology or like what satisfies those conditions. And they were like, okay, well, you should just ask her. Like, just be upfront. Like, girls like that, you know? It's like, hey, like where do you see this and stuff? And so I did. So I texted her, and I'm like, hey, are we boyfriend and girlfriend? And her response was, I'm not really looking for a relationship for the summer. And in my head, little like 16-year-old me, I'm like, you know what that means? The second that school starts, it's officially in a relationship. That's how the words sounded in my head. You know, so it's like, boom, like the second that, you know, you're officially in school, you know, boom, once school starts back up, you have a relationship. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. So, because she lived in another town, her school, they started like a week before us. And I remember like texting her, and I like wouldn't get a response, and she was like, oh yeah, I'm at school. She was also, I think, in marching band. She played like the clarinet or something like that. And I remember, like I'd text her and I wouldn't get a response. She's like, yeah, sorry, we're like just busy with band stuff. Like, and I'm like, oh, okay. But then the next week starts, and I start school. And in my head, I'm thinking, it's official. I have a girlfriend. Jordan's my girlfriend, because that's the way that she said it. So it'd basically be like, I'd get home from school, be like, I'd text her, be like, hey, how was school? Usually wouldn't get a response. But I'd think, okay, well, she's with marching band, okay. And then maybe I'd send one more text like, hey, I'm going to bed, good night. And usually, okay, also I would be like, hey, good night, I love you. But this was like a church friend, so that was like, hey, church love you. Like, I'd say I love you to like all my friends and like girl friends at church, I mean. You know, that was just like, oh, hey, I love you, like church lovey-dovey. That's a normal thing to do. And so I remember, you know, it's like, okay, but again, usually I was getting like little responses. Or it would be like, oh, hey, I'm going to bed, good night, love you. She'd be like, night, or okay. It was like super, like, yeah, I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem the most positive, or like, hey, things are going great. So I remember, yeah, the second week of school starts, and it's Monday, and I text her, and it's like after school, I text her like, hey, how was your day at school? And I get a text back from Jordan's number that said, this is Jordan's boyfriend. Don't text my girlfriend anymore. And I'm just like, fuck, what the fuck is going on? And I'm like freaking out. I then get a text from her brother, who we had become friends with, and we didn't like play on Xbox Live and stuff. We were playing like Call of Duty and shit. And so I get a text from her brother that says, girlfriend, or Jordan doesn't have a boyfriend. Like, she's just messing. Like, she says that you like talk to her too much, or like you're like too attached or something. And I'm like, okay, I guess as someone, hey, me being completely unknowledgeable, I had been probably sending her a lot of texts without receiving responses, like back and forth. But so yeah, after hey, this whole thing, it's like, oh yeah, like you don't text my girlfriend. And I'm like, holy fuck. But so I send her back and I'm like, okay, like sorry if I've like been like overbearing or something. Like I'll cut it back. And that was a Monday night. I didn't text her the rest of the week. Like not Tuesday, not Wednesday, Thursday. Friday comes around, I send her a text. I say, like, are we okay? Like, is this still a thing? I get a text back, we were never anything to begin with. And that fucking crushed my like little like 16-year-old fucking heart. I was just like we were never anything to begin with. I'm like, holy fuck. Especially like, because in my eyes, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. Like that's what she said. Like, oh hey, officially, what? Like, oh, she didn't want a relationship for the summer. And so I'm thinking, well, hey, it's not the summer anymore, so we're in a relationship. But that was not it. And I'm like, oh fuck. So that broke my fucking heart. I was like, holy shit, just, yeah, we were never anything to begin with. That is just some of the hardest words I've ever taken. But that fucking crushed me. But then there was a bit of a synopsis follow-up. The next summer, I go back to church camp, and Ashley is there, the cuter girl, the like more fun and bubbly girl, but Jordan isn't. And I'm text because we weren't like attending the church camp. We were the counselors at the church camp. That's how we had met. And so yeah, Ashley was there, and eventually we get on the topic of like, oh, like dating, and oh, she probably had another boyfriend, but we eventually get on. She was like, hey, you dated Jordan, right? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I did a little. She was like, yeah, she's a lesbian. And in my head, I'm like, what? Because I was thinking like, holy fuck, I turned a girl lesbian. Like, oh, like she was like, hey, I'll give Wilson one last chance, and then like, nope, fuck, no, that's not gonna happen. And I'm like, oh shit, because I mean, this is still 16-year-old me, and like, oh fuck, I was like really unknowledgeable about this stuff. And yeah, I'm just like, oh, I turned a girl lesbian. Like that can't be the best like thing to say. Like, hey, what are your like, I don't know. And yeah, this was the very first girl I dated. And I'm like, wow, okay, how was that for my like girl history? Like, hey, wow, date one girl, turn her lesbian, and what else? You're like, well, I had not turned her lesbian, she was just a lesbian. But yeah, I mean, that was just fucking crazy. So yeah, that's the story of Jordan. Yeah, Jordan the lesbian. So how about that? That's my Jordan story. a weird start to my dating career, because yeah, it's like, oh, we were never like a boyfriend and girlfriend officially, but I would say we dated. We went to, I mean, typically our dates would be like, oh, I drive to her house, and then we get in her car, and she'd drive to the movies. We'd see a movie, I would pay for the movie, usually I would pay for ice cream afterwards, and we'd drive back. And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, it wasn't like the best of dates, but they were dates.